So our next talk is by President Anita Frederick of the Tribal Nations Research Group. And her talk is on agricultural data management and ownership in Native American communities. Anita, are you ready? Maybe she's not. I see her count. 13.2% increase. Okay, you're off mute now, Anita.
Yes, I am. Hold on. Yes, hold on. For some reason, I got another computer talking to me.
Okay.
So we can get rid of that one. Okay.
All right. Let me make sure I'm not sharing my screen. I'm not. All right. Go ahead.
Good morning, everybody. As Aaron said, my name is Anita Frederick, and I am the president of Tribal Nations Research Group. I'm an enrolled member of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa. We're located in north central North Dakota, way up on the Canadian border. So we're about as north as we can get. The topic of my presentation today is more around data ownership and data sovereignty for tribes, but also integrating a little bit about the agriculture component into it. I'm just wondering if you guys, okay, so at Tribal Nations Research Group is a small nonprofit organization. We have a small staff, but a lot of work. And our overall mission of TNRG is just to, we just want to improve the quality of life for all of our tribal members. And we do that through culturally competent, custom fit data and research. And our purpose is evolving all the time, but right now it's about providing quality research that's relevant to our people, to Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa, and that we actually have ownership in this research. Okay, I need to ignore the chat room, I guess. And that the research results, oops, sorry. Okay, Erin, I'm really not doing this well. Okay, and we do a lot of research education. We manage the research review board, and if we run out of time, I have a little bit about Tribal Nations Research Group at the end of the presentation. I didn't want to take up too much time on that part of it. So today, hopefully you guys will understand a little bit more about how tribes are exercising their rights through data sovereignty, and why tribes actually want to govern and govern data and have ownership of it, and really like how we're developing our own data management policies and practices within tribes across the upper Midwest. And then how this all impacts our ability to preserve and protect our traditional and cultural agricultural practices. So when we talk about data sovereignty, the National Congress of American Indians actually has a good definition of it. There's many out there, but data sovereignty entails a lot of things, and not just about ag, but about everything. So it's really, the right of each tribe to govern the collection, ownership, and application of data, information, and knowledge about its people, resources, and its land. This is possible because of the tribe's inherent right to govern, which is acknowledged in our treaties and other legal mechanisms and negotiated on a nation-to-nation basis with settler colonial governments. And there was a lot of effort put into that statement. I was part of the discussion when we did put that statement together. So when we talk about data sovereignty, some of the things that we really consider in data ownership and data management, it's about our people. First and foremost, it's always about our people. It's about our citizens of our tribe. It's about the people in our communities, and maybe not necessarily citizens, but our members, our enrolled members of our tribe, but just people who live in our communities. It's about our tribal members, and it's about our culture of our people. In addition, you know, we always think about our resources, our water, our traditional plants, our food, our ceremonial practices. All of that is important when we think about data, and that's why we really want to govern that process and take control of that process, because and oversee the data components of any research project or any just systemic collection of data within our community, because water is important. And an example about protection of water is, you know, recently in North Dakota, water has become a big issue because of fracking, the oil industry, and a lot of fracking practices going on. And Turtle Mountain took a stance early on in this process that they weren't ever going to allow fracking in our community, because we actually are the home of one of the largest aquifers, and it's a really unique aquifer, and part of our reservation is on that aquifer. And through our treaty rights, we actually have a lot to say about that aquifer, even though like the majority of it isn't located within our land, and just a small portion of it is. But there's been some very heated discussions across the state with our tribal leadership, our water protectors, about the use of that water over the last few years, and the data that we've collected, and I should say lack of data that we have about our water, protected it for us for a couple of years until some studies are done and about regenerating and how it actually regenerates and becomes and is sustainable. So data plays an important role in our protections. Another important piece is land. We're a unique tribe. We have a very small land base. Our reservation size is only 6 miles by 12 miles, but we do own a lot of additional land that's not even connected to the reservation or adjacent to the reservation. We own lands through South Dakota, North Dakota, Montana, and within Rolette County, we own a lot of land. So it's hard for jurisdictional issues to really carry out a lot of our laws, because it's spotted laws all over. So more recently now, there's been a lot of MOUs and those types of things developed with states and counties and things like that about land and protection of the land, and use of insecticides and things like that for farming. So we talk about data sovereignty. The most important piece of that is the laws. So tribes actually create their own laws, and one of the laws that our tribe did, and TNRG did for our tribe, was develop a research code. And what research codes do is it's a roadmap for researchers to use when they come in, and that way they understand what's allowable, what's not allowable, why we do things. It has our code of ethics, our 7 teachings, all of that within the codes and within our laws. So we're fortunate that we can create our own laws and say and have a say in how research can be conducted within our community and with our people. More recently, over the last maybe 5, 6, 7 years, we have started to develop food codes, which kind of is for your agriculture and producing, and all of that comes into play. So Turtle Mountain is in the middle of developing a tribal food code for our reservation and our people. And within that code, we develop a lot more processes. In addition, we have agriculture departments. Many years ago, tribes didn't have ag departments. They relied solely on USDA or other state agencies to oversee and manage agriculture and agriculture growing in our communities. But tribes, again, across the nation are developing and growing a lot of their own food, developing resources for themselves. And a lot of this is done through agriculture and through their ag departments. A big thing that's recently through the Farm Bill was the hemp production and the allowability of hemp and all of that. And then the last piece of the laws is that we also get to include our cultural preservation offices in the discussion. And sometimes it just depends on what reservation you're on and what tribal community you're working with. Everything might fall under the Cultural Preservation Office. So your research might be under there, your food codes might be established under the Cultural Preservation Office. Again, Turtle Mountain's a little unique in that we're a nonprofit organization outside of our tribal government that oversees pretty much all these offices. The next piece of this is research. Like we're really taking control of data through research and the research process. So and that's all done through research development. So we've been active in ensuring when we get research requested. Turtle Mountain's also unique in that we don't just do human subjects reviews and with our IRB. We actually review all research. So anybody that's coming to our community that will be collecting data in a systemic way and using it for general knowledge. So our protection isn't just protecting the human rights of people and people in general. It's about protecting, again, our land and our resources, in addition to that, in our culture. So we have an opportunity to gain a lot of understanding through research, and particularly when researchers come in and want to do research with our communities. And then many tribes are also now establishing research agendas, and Turtle Mountain is amongst one of those tribes. So we've established research priorities for education, social science areas, environmental, human subjects, medical, those types of things. So it's really an exciting process. And we do all this a lot of times through data ownership. So part of our research code includes ownership of any data that's collected within our community. And this has been a challenging process, working through federal agencies, working with universities, working with private research organizations. It really is starting from the top with federal law that this becomes an issue, because each of the federal agencies have their practices that they need to follow. And a lot of times that doesn't align with what tribal governments are hoping to see, are wishing to see through their laws. So it has been quite a trip working with data ownership, but each time we deal with data ownership, I think we get a lot stronger and get better at it. We're also doing this through data collection efforts of our own. So we've done food sovereignty work. We've done a food sovereignty assessment. More recently, we're working on doing greenhouse development. We have a small, really not formalized project of redeveloping wild rice, which is a traditional food of the Chippewa people. And because we've moved from the Red River Valley region to another location in North Dakota, the wild rice didn't come with us. So now we're trying to get back and start developing some of that ourselves, because that's one of our traditional foods. And we've been, one of our growers has been successful and been able to make 3 successful crops. So 3 years in a row, and we're hoping to expand that production a little bit more each year. And then we also, like I said, do that through data governance. So a lot of times when we are doing our own data collection, we have our tribal people, advise us in how that data should be collected, how that data should be used in the future, who should have access to that data. what security measures need to be in place for the data, all of the good stuff that everybody else actually works on when they do data ownership. So, and then a big piece of what we manage is data use. So we do data use agreements for all of our data that's collected. So if, say, Turtle Mountain, like Tribal Nations Research Group, has done a food sovereignty assessment, and somebody comes to me and says, well, we would like to have and maybe use that data and build off of what you currently have, then we would establish like data use agreements with them. Same thing goes with the researcher. They would come in and say, well, my research team wants to use the data that we collected. So we basically will create a data use agreement for that purpose. And it's mostly just so we can track where the data is going. We've only like maybe once or twice denied use of data. And it was just because it was only mostly for that individual's personal gain. And our committees don't see that as a proper way of using any of our tribal data is for personal gain.
1 minute left, Anita.
Oh, geez. That goes really fast. So we do a lot around data management. And so we're going to get to the guts of this whole thing really quick. Why do we do all this? It's for protection again. And protection leads to cultural preservation. So we want to protect our traditional food systems, and we are redeveloping those. We're bringing them back to life through small garden projects, small foods projects, and we're also protecting our. We want our tribes to flourish through hunting, fishing, and gathering. And in the past, people have been able to just come in and wipe us out, and we had no laws to protect that. Particularly, this is true with a lot of our medicines. Our traditional medicines are part of our forage in our community. They grow naturally within our community, and we don't have access to this if we don't maintain control of our agriculture and development. So, and all of this allows our tribes to engage and protect our ceremonial practices, because without the hunting and the fishing and having those traditional foods and those medicines, then we can't really do our ceremonies. We can't participate in our ceremonies. And it's also protection for our land and resources. And again, we do all this for sovereignty. It helps our tribes understand the depth and breadth of all of our own resources. It helps us paint a more accurate picture of what resources we have available and what we need. And it gives us the data tools that the tribe to evaluate, what do we need to do better? Do we need a forestry program that's more effective? Do we need a water resource committee that's, going to go to the state and work with the state? So all of that comes together through the cultural preservation piece of it. And then it just gives us our own control. With that being said, I'm going to skip over this and we'll go to questions. Did I do okay, Aaron? You
did fantastic. I'm the one who screwed up on this. So Anita, I don't know if you noticed, Brian is actually scheduled to go before you. So I juggled the order there. So I apologize to Brian King and to you, but thank you for being ready to go. Do we have any questions, Dave?
Right. Yes. A comment from, thanks for your talk, a very interesting and important aspect of data and research. So now comes the question. How do you see interacting with open data projects? And do you see a special category of data that handles culturally sensitive data?
Yes. So that's kind of been our, like where we always stand with when it comes to data, is we have information that can go into open source data, but then we have a lot of data that should not be in open source. And what, like the human subjects, like Health and Human Services has done, is they've put those under a special protections category. So they've identified like Native Americans as a special identifications category, and researchers to come in and do research or do data collection in tribal communities. If a tribe has a research code, a research law, or even a procedure in place, those researchers are required to go to those tribes and meet with them to get approval to do the data collection or research in the community. And that's after about 6-7 years of work. So it doesn't all happen quickly, but you know, it's getting there, and we always appreciate the work that that the federal government, our state governments, our researchers are always willing to really get feedback and but yes, to answer your question, yes, there should be an additional category. And it's not only for tribes, I would say for any indigenous population that, you know, has like cultural practices, or even not even indigenous, like any culture that needs to be protected.
Okay. Another comment, great presentation. And the question is, do the treaties protect genetic resources for agriculture? For example, the wild rice that you had mentioned.
No, our treaties actually don't. Like I know Turtle Mountains does, and I know it doesn't for like the Chippewa tribes in Minnesota. And that's kind of been like an issue because, you know, to stay traditional and the way you process a lot of our foods, you can't, like a lot of times you can't mass produce. So in order to mass produce, companies that maybe are not, say, take the wild rice, for instance, they could maybe mass produce at a different rate than if you are actually going through the cultural and traditional practices of growing wild rice. So they could outproduce these tribes in production and take away one of their sole resources of income. And so, you know, we could weigh you know, do we want to continue to do things the way we've been doing them, or do we want to change? It always goes back to that cultural significance piece of it. So, you know, it's difficult. It's difficult to navigate because sometimes, you know, you're hurting yourself in things that you do, but you also have to consider the implications of maybe losing your culture in the process, and that's always more important to us, I think.
All right, David, I think we got time for one more question.
All right, another thank you for your presentation. And the question is, are you involved in the Global Indigenous Data Alliance and the development of the CARE principles at all? C-A-R-E, all capitals.
No, we're not at this point, but I have done some Aaron and I will kind of know that we're pretty short-handed with a lot of responsibility. And we're recently looking at some ways to expand that. And we do have some friends at NCAI, the National Congress of American Indians, in a collaborative with some other tribes in the state of North Dakota, Minnesota, and South Dakota, that we kind of like share, like you take on this role and I'll take on this role. And then we kind of all work together to ensure we're all involved at some level with feedback or input.
Yeah, related to that, there's a question, are Native American communities interested in involving with lobbying public mobilization along with other interest groups to have a similar act like the HIPAA Act, except constituted for ag data?
I would definitely assume that that's something that tribes would like to have in place, even a component, a subcomponent of the big law. And that's something that Jim and a couple of us have all talked about was, is that needed at a point? And we've had those discussions, and I know Turtle Mountain would be interested in something like that. And so.
Well, thank you,
Okay.
Anita. We're over time again. I appreciate the time taken to present, and hopefully, if anybody wants to reach out to Anita, you go to tnrg.org, and all the contact information would be there. Right, Tribal Nations Research Group, tnrg.org.